So thank you to all of you other people out there whom I can assume collaboration. I don't know. For what it's worth, thanks, and I hope it's okay. I don't see why it wouldn't be. Well, let's go on from there. Blah bitty blue bitty blah.
Blah 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 blah.
Here at Synchronospheres, I want to be able to produce a eclectic number of perspectives, and one of which some of my interns have brought to my attention: the ongoing heated debate between certain mainstream vocal members of the archaeological scientific group and a particular figure whom they find particularly disturbing, and the commentors, the people who are keeping an eye on this debate and trying to keep people honest and also bring to our attention this whole discourse. One of whom is a gentleman who has been sitting here with a funny face on my screen. His name is Dan. I don't recall his last name, but his channel is Dedunking, and he's a pretty cool dude, pretty down to earth, pretty good sense of humor. And I also find him to be very rational and well thought out and pretty well spoken. Seems like a pretty good guy. Oops, hi.
That he trusts.
And I wanted to talk about his talking about someone else talking about what someone else said. So what's happening here is there's this author, former journalist named Graham Hancock, and he likes to wonder and speculate about the possibility of... Hey, this is Walt from the editing bay, and I just was realizing how terribly I was rambling there about what I was trying to say, and I thought I would script out a little bit just to try to be a little bit more concise, and here goes. There's an author and journalist who speculates about the possibility of a lost chapter in human history. His ideas are drawn from practicing scientists in the field, as well as historical theories and hypotheses. He then correlates these ideas into an evolving body of work, postulating that there may be unrecognized connections. Many of the topics he discusses, which were once considered fringe, have since been validated by scientific research. Conversely, some of the concepts he's explored have been disproven. He remains cautious, avoiding claims of certainty, and adapts his ideas in response to new data and changing times. He has authored several books and recently produced the second season of a popular Netflix show. While his work is intriguing on its own, his growing popularity has also attracted opposition. Several detractors have emerged, some resorting to uncouth tactics such as ad hominem attacks and other logical fallacies. Ironically, his ideas are just that, ideas, and can be debated as such. However, the vitriol of his critics has sparked more interest in him than his work alone ever did, and that's where we find ourselves, in a position to ping-pong ideas back and forth, or at least be on the receiving end and attempt to send a signal back out. So that's what I'm doing. I am commenting, and I am casting my lot into the ring, and I would like to express my thoughts and opinions, and I don't know. Graham Hancock, the author in question, is suggesting, again, by way of scientists, bringing up their research, that It may have something to do with asteroid impacts from the Taurids, which we can still see today, which cross the night skies twice a year. And his idea, which is not his idea, the idea that he's borrowing, is that this asteroid event would have, in our remote past, around 12 to 11,000 years ago, have peppered the Earth with all sorts of impacts. And if you look at the known asteroid events in the recent past, such as, I keep wanting to say Tuskegee, but that's not it. It's I got to look it up. That'd be the right thing to do. Out in Russia, there was an airburst where a piece of debris from space came in, exploded in the atmosphere, and annihilated, I want to say, hundreds of miles of forest in the 1900s. And, I mean, it devastated it. That was one. If it had happened over a populated area, it would be much more in the zeitgeist, but it didn't. And so it kind of went, by the wayside. So he and some scientists speculate that the Earth may have been bombarded by many of these for a while, and that the people living in that era would have kind of had a big problem. At the same time, we're not sure why. We're not sure if that's the actual cause, but what we do know was that there was dramatic climactic shifts, and that there was floods. And Mr. Hancock assigns many of the globally acknowledged flood myths to a potential global situation where people would have, made note of this and added it to their oral traditions, and then by way of centuries passing, it would have faded into myth. And that's what we have today. So I think that that's a fascinating idea, along with many other people, while at the same time, there are many people who dismiss this and say that it is not only dangerous, but foolish, and not only foolish, but dangerous. So there's this back and forth between Graham Hancock and the more vocal members of the archaeological establishment. And meanwhile, there's other people, not unlike myself, who are on the sidelines but have been observing it. And some of these guys have done a great job by pointing out mistakes that were made in the arguments on both sides. And there's been some vitriol going on. There's some nice, juicy drama. And so this guy, Debunking Dan, has been kind of imposing himself into the conversation by making note of some things that are noteworthy. And I wanted to take a look at some of his work and add my own 2 cents. So let's get started.
John Hoops, an anthropologist for Kansas University and a longtime critic of Graham Hancock, recently posted what I can only say is the most insane thing I've ever seen posted on the internet, at least by an academic. I mean, it's a bunch of self-centered unawareness, ideological conflation, and a big fat dose of copium because he didn't like how the recent U.S. presidential election went down. So when he put all that together, the ball that he spit out was plumb insane. Hi, my name's Dan. Welcome to Debunking. John Hoops is a professor of anthropology at Kansas University, like I said, and he's also a longtime major player in the pseudo-archaeology debunking community. He's taken it upon himself to make numerous blogs and articles and posts and videos, and he communicates with people being interviewed and interviewing others, and in this case a Twitter post on his now locked Twitter since Elon changed the rules. He even on occasion will edit Wikipedia pages, and by on occasion I mean religiously, and teaches the students to do so, and he may or may not even tell you that that's what he does, depending on who you are and which direction the wind's blowing and what he's trying to get across here. That's a subject for a different video, like this one here, but what's important to keep in mind is that John Hoops, John Hoops is not just some guy that goes around debunking Graham Hancock and people like him. He is probably the most influential archaeologist or anthropologist in that community. And for example, he's the guy that Graham Hancock wanted to debate when he went on Joe Rogan. Now, he got stuck with Flint Dibble because John Hoops is too big of a coward to go on Joe Rogan. Or perhaps, I could be wrong there, perhaps Flint Dibble just has a better tailor. And John just didn't feel like, I'll just defer to Flint's suit in this one. That could be the case. I'll let you guys decide. But anyway, let's just get on into the post before I spend all day long picking on these two. I have long said that archaeology is the canary in the coal mine. The canary in the coal mine thing's a metaphor for those of you who aren't aware. Back in the day when they would mine and they were worried about hitting poisonous gas and they didn't have fancy little detectors, they would use a canary because they were far more susceptible to it than humans were, so they would snuff it long before it was an extreme danger to people, so this would tell them to get their boys out. That's what this means. So in other words, John's trying to tell us here that archaeology lets us know before the social changes or the zeitgeist of the moment or whatever you want to say, whichever direction the wind is blowing, archaeology, it's the first one to catch that direction, and then the rest of the world catches up. Archaeology, it's more susceptible than everything else. Like I said, this stuff is insane.
What's this?
For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations,
I think I like this guy.
Please subscribe. Last month, one of Graham Hancock's regular contributors posted an article on his website that attacked Milo Rossi, better known as Mini Minuteman. Most of my regular viewers know who he is. His series Debunking Ancient Apocalypse, Hancock's Netflix show, is, I think, the most watched critique of ancient apocalypse on the internet. So it is no surprise that he is now being attacked personally by Hancock's cadre. Hancock posted a link to Skinner's ad hominem article, saying, "Thanks to brilliant freelance researcher Holly Lasko Skinner, who I've worked with for many years, for looking into this phenomenon at a time when my energies have been focused elsewhere." Since Skinner's article refers to me numerous times, using my words to attack Mini Minuteman, and misunderstands things that I've said, I think I ought to correct the record. In this video, I want to look specifically at Holly Lasko Skinner's argument that Milo Rossi, Mini Minuteman, is a pseudo-archaeologist. According to my definition, he isn't. I made a whole video defining what pseudo-archaeology is, and if you haven't seen it yet, I recommend watching it. I made the video because I noticed there was a great deal of misunderstanding about what pseudo-archaeology is. To make it as clear as I possibly could, I even included illustrative skits to drive the point home. Skinner watched it, and it went over her head. I realize it is possible that she is motivated not to understand it, but it's also possible I still wasn't clear enough, so I hope this video will rectify that situation.
I find that a lot of the time that these guys... So I tend to lean to sit on the side of the fence of Senor Hancock, merely because I find his argument a bit more compelling. His means of argumentation a bit more reasonable. I think he addresses things directly from what I watch, whereas a lot of these guys beat around the bush. I feel like they're trying to win a debate rather than come to understanding of ideas.
Skinner spends the first part of her article showing that Milo currently calls himself an archaeologist. Then she refers to a live stream that I did in June of 2022, in which Milo appeared, and he said this:
I don't know what to label myself as, because it'd make me feel like a fraud to say that I am an archaeologist when I have like a training in it. I haven't been out on a dig, so it's like I don't want to like claim that, when in reality that title requires a lot of research and a lot of time and investment in order to say that. So I'm just like,
education.
Milo. I talk about this stuff. You guys know I've been researching it, my whole life. I'm a researcher. But like, I don't feel the need to like make up some title to try and make myself sound like I'm, I don't know, better than I am.
So here Milo says that he doesn't feel comfortable calling himself an archaeologist. Skinner concludes that there's a contradiction. She writes, as evidenced in Chapter 1, Milo Rossi, aka Minuteman, is on record stating that he is an archaeologist. He is not an archaeologist because he hasn't been adequately trained. If he were to call himself an archaeologist, he'd feel like a fraud. Did you catch the mistake? She writes that Milo said he is not an archaeologist because he has not been adequately trained. Is that what he said? Let's play the clip again.
I have like a training in it. I haven't been out on a dig,
He said it would make him feel like a fraud to say he is an archaeologist when, although he does have the training in it, he hasn't been out on a dig. This is
All right. So is being out on a dig part of the training required for it? Although I have the training for it, I have not done this bit of it. So is he saying I have the training for it as kind of a defense? And he slipped that in awfully quick, too, by the way. So is it a major blunder on her part? I haven't even watched her video. But see, this is what I'm talking about. This is her first major blunder because Milo slipped in there himself saying, although I... Right? Look at it.
Dake. She writes that Milo said he is not an archaeologist because he has not been adequately trained. Is that what he said? Let's play the clip again.
I have like a training in it. I haven't been out on a dig.
He said, I have like a training in it. He did not say, I have adequate training in it. So I think that that's your first major mistake. And I hate to take on that affect because it's ugly. But I'm hearing that and it arouses that kind of a response. He says, right? He says, not what you're saying he says. He has not been adequately trained.
Is an archaeologist. He is not an archaeologist.
And he has said that he is an archaeologist.
Because he hasn't been adequately trained. If he were to call himself an archaeologist, he'd feel like a fraud.
And he says this, yes, we can agree with that. So why is this a problem for World of Antiquity? Why is this a problem? Because he hasn't been adequately trained. He says he has been trained. He's about to say
Did you
it.
catch the mistake? She writes that Milo said he is not an archaeologist because he has not been adequately trained.
I'm going to go over it again.
Is that what he said? Let's play the clip again.
Is that what he
I
said?
have like a training in it. I
had like a training in it does not mean I have been adequately trained. And he goes on to say that he has not had certain aspects of said training, such as being on a dig. So are you suggesting that I've had a partial like training on it where I haven't had certain aspects of it that would probably be required? You're suggesting that that is adequate, even though he himself says it's not. He himself says he would feel like a fraud if he were to use that terminology in reference to himself. Therefore, he doesn't want to, even though he has like a training in it. But you're going to go ahead and say that that's adequate and that that is a major mistake on her part. Okay.
been out on a dig.
I understand.
He said it would make him feel like a fraud to say he is an archaeologist when, although he does have the training in it, he hasn't been out on a dig.
If we're going to get into
first.
semantics, he said he has like the training in it. She said he does not have adequate training in it. Right? So you're stirring this pot up. You're bringing up this question, and you're calling it a major mistake. So I think it would be fair of you. See, I don't even like to watch these because it gets me all upset and angry. Dan's calm, and Dan usually addresses both sides pretty adequately.
Towards people in power and the people that had money, a lot like John Hoops is, but that's neither here nor there. What I don't see is any connection at all to him and pseudo-archaeology. Now maybe I'm wrong, and that I'm missing a point here. Maybe John Hoops doesn't believe that Adam was the person that did Sandy Hook. Maybe
because
John
there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. He said, she said, and that whatever her name was,
For regular videos,
Holly Lasco, her video is only being enacted out of defense of this Graham Hancock. So that, like, you know, ping pong, or as they say in the Far East, ping pong of words and stuff. So Graham Hancock, the show, it's on Netflix. What's it called? Ancient Apocalypse. Check it out. See what's being said. If somebody says something, let's go ahead and double check and make sure that that's what they actually said. I haven't gotten through the second season yet. I really enjoyed the first season, the first few episodes of the second season. And I find the things that he is saying, whether it's potentially true or not, he's not phrasing things as like, I have the answer and this is it and these guys are wrong. He's saying, what if? The whole time he's proposing it as a question. He's saying, this is leading me down this rabbit hole, blah, 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 blah. They're also saying, like, when the first season came out, there were so many videos that were saying, this is a dangerous show. This is the most dangerous show. And it was like, we're all going to hop on this bandwagon because it's dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because some of the ideas that Mr. Hancock is talking about, again, these aren't coming out of him. These are scientifically illustrated? Scientifically illustrated. It's Sports Illustrated and Scientific American coming together. These are scientifically theorized situations that Mr. Hancock is then going around and looking into. Some of these ideas were also looked at by people in recent history. Some of these ideas go back quite a ways. Some of them were inspected by a certain political party who came to power around the time of the World Wars, especially in Germany, whose name starts with N, and I don't want to say it because YouTube, algorithms, stuff, right? So just because certain horrible people have been curious about these things and had written about it, it somehow gives license to these opponents of Graham Hancock to say, Graham Hancock's using these ideas. He believes everything that those guys believed. And so they will label him as these horrible things. He's been called a racist because he talks about ideas that were talked about by racists. And in one hand, superficially, you could say, oh yeah, no, I get that. That tracks. That you know, this horrible person is talking about something, it must be horrible too. But just because a murderer liked vanilla ice cream, it doesn't mean that everybody who likes vanilla ice cream is a murderer. That's a simple, silly analogy, but I think it works. I don't believe Graham Hancock's a racist. Nothing he's ever said that I've heard or read has ever suggested to me that he's got a racist bone in his body. He's got a wife who's a different race than him. He's got children and grandchildren of mixed heritage. And that wouldn't even be a part of the conversation if these other people weren't pointing such, what's it called, ad hominem, personal attacks to try to win an otherwise unrelated, an impersonal discussion, which really ought to be about talking about ideas, the possibilities of things. But instead, I don't know. There's something wrong with the world today. I don't know what it is. But it gets ugly. And so
I do see.
There's all this wonderful, juicy drama going on. Guys like Debunking Dan here are looking through it, parsing through it, and really calling out the people who are being showing bad behavior, and that's what's great. And I just wanted to, throw my stick into the ring, throw my 2 cents into the fountain, whatever.
Now, for those of you who live under a rock, Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse Season 2's dropped. That's his Netflix documentary series on the lost civilization. And of course, with this comes the archaeologists and their associated friends that want to come in and debunk Hancock. And Well, that's just fine and good as long as they, do their proper arguments. But usually, quite frequently anyway, these guys come in and they do these half-baked things. They just kind of misrepresent Graham's position, don't bother researching Graham's position enough to actually look into it. Give him the worst possible benefit of the doubt. It's twist words, sometimes flat out obfuscate facts, or even get openly dishonest. Now, a lot of YouTubers have created very successful channels farming Graham for engagement. And Graham's referred to these people as leeches, and you can see why. They are very much, the success of their channel is completely and directly associated with the success of Graham. And these guys, they're the ones that are just like, quite frequently, just half-baked. Those are the ones that are the least researched. The least researched might be the wrong way of putting it. They're less concerned with being accurate than they are concerned with making a good impression on their audience. And so the facts end up taking the back seat to the narrative that they want to forge. Quite often this involves Graham being associated with some pretty horrible ideas, and that the pedigree of his idea comes from some really bad places, and all that associated BS. Basically, it gets really, really ugly, which is why I started making videos when the guys were doing this kind of stuff on Ancient Apocalypse Season 1. You can find numerous debunkings of me debunking them, debunking Graham. It gets pretty Inception, but I think you get...
So, I just want to interrupt for a moment. It does get pretty Inception. And I'm on that train. However, I am not bunking or debunking. Dunking is a basketball term. Dedunking is kind of a bastardization of that, mashing it up with debunking. So somebody says something, somebody else debunks it, and then somebody else comes along and says, hey, your debunking needs to be debunked, so that's dedunked. And what I'm doing, I think we could call an alley-oop. That's another basketball thing. Maybe we need to kind of mash it up with some sort of other phrase or term. What do you think, buddy? That's Griffin the dog. But for now, it's like an alley-oop. No? I don't know. Whatever.
What I'm saying. But now we got Season 2, not only did Graham kind of tighten up his language a little bit, so it's a little bit harder for them to attack. We also have, they know that I'm going to come and get them if they screw up too bad, so far we haven't seen any open debunkings yet, except for the pre-bunking from a couple of boneheads that I didn't even bother addressing. But this is some actual academics here. Now, there's a small channel, tiny little reach, but these guys are very much about slamming at Graham Hancock with their PhDs and all their freaking tenured accolades next to their names, and I'm not even going to go through the whole video.
Thank you for joining us again, Dr. Kinkella. Of course, we've invited you because you are now our go-to when we're doing something for pseudo-archaeology.
I did a little looking into Dr. Kinkella, and I don't want to poison the well, but let's just say that anybody that they're going to go to as a go-to person for pseudo-archaeology, probably of the John Hoops, Flint Dibble persuasion, and they're a little bit less than honest. That seems to be kind of a common theme that we see in this stuff. They just kind of twist things, massage the facts a little bit, and have a very skewed outlook on this stuff to begin with.
We decided to review an episode of the new season of Graham Hancock's show, Ancient Apocalypse. We decided to only cover one episode because why subject ourselves to more than that when all we need is to put Graham Hancock in the description of this podcast so that the SEO will pick it up. That's the whole reason we're doing it.
Yeah, like I said, they're pretty openly just doing this for the money, and here's a great example of that. I mean, they're just shooting at Graham Hancock here because they want to get views. They want to get clicks. They don't want to watch it. They have no desire to talk about it.
Now, in all fairness, I'm on that wagon myself, right? I mean, I have like 3 subscribers who are all family members and close friends. I'm on that wagon myself to some degree. But my motivation isn't exclusively to garnish some attention. I'd like to add some commentary, some idea to the discussion. I'd like to examine it critically and fairly, and I just want to be in on the talk. I want to be a fly on the wall, which any one of us can be, because we can watch it all unfold through the wonders of the modern world and technology. But I figure, why not, cast my lot and, throw my 2 cents in for no other reason than I have interest and I have the ability. So, I am also leeching to some extent, in full disclosure. Not only from these big guys out there, but also from Mr. Dedunking Dan. So thank you to all of you other people out there whom I can assume collaboration. I don't know. For what it's worth, thanks, and I hope it's okay. I don't see why it wouldn't be. Well, let's go on from there.
Okay. From a YouTuber perspective, let me give you some YouTuber advice here. If you think it's good, but the algorithm doesn't fire up and grab onto it, guess what? I'll give you 3 guesses what the problem is. It's not good.
So we decided to cover the last...
I also take a little issue with what Dan just said. If you think it's good and the algorithm doesn't take it and run with it, it doesn't automatically mean, Dan, that it's not necessarily good. There's a lot of factors. My dog is now going to try and get under my feet into the desk. There's a lot of factors that come into play with that algorithm, as we all know. And I think it would be perhaps a bit short-sighted of us, Dan, to make the assumption that all good work gets automatically picked up by said algorithm. The machine lords have their own agenda that doesn't always include merely propagating decent work, I think.
And again, weaves in his claims about not only the Maya, but about, of course, the super civilization that existed 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age that was destroyed by a comet, and there's no evidence of it anywhere at all ever, except that all cultures on Earth are related to it, right? It's the same thing that he always says, but this is just his newest package deal for it. So that's the kind of umbrella of what we're gonna talk about.
Just like I said, tons of disdain. And it's the same thing he always does. He does a lost civilization. It's just mockery and disdain instead of actually being like, well, let's talk about what the evidence here is. And I disagree with Grant. It's really easy to see the difference between the guys that approach these kinds of things scientifically and the guys that approach them with the attitude of, I'm just going to come in here and get some views. I'm going to get they're not big enough to get ad revenue off of YouTube anyway. Maybe they are on their podcast. I don't know.
And neither am I, but I couldn't agree with Dan more. If you're going to examine something, why not examine it? Why not explore it? Hear what the man has to say and, add something to it. If something's critically wrong, fine. Bring that up. You can do it in a constructive manner. It doesn't have to be derogatory.
Yeah.
And, I have to say, after watching this episode, Graham Hancock's idea is silly, but after really thinking about what he's saying, it has never sounded more silly to me than after hearing him describe it in this particular episode. When you just really think about what he's actually suggesting, it makes no sense at all. So I guess we'll get to that by the end of our episode here.
Guys, Graham's always a big stupid head, but this time he's a big stupider header than normal. Make sure to like and subscribe.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to that by the end. We're gonna get to the specifics as to why he's such a stupid head. Just not right now. They don't get to it because it's not real. By the way, I got to get one of those 3D printed vases.
If
Yeah,
not
Keanu
embarrassed.
Reeves is in this season of this show, which is really sad because he's
Really?
been like untouchable for his entire career. He's been like one of these perfect people that has no flaws, and now he's got this mark, which hopefully he's going to address by talking to some real archaeologists.
That's so funny because the show's been out and there's been no backlash. There's nobody besides people who are teeny tiny idiots who think people should listen to them. I don't think anybody should listen to me. I just want to be able to speak. Nobody's going after Keanu. And if you watch the show, they're not saying anything bad. They're talking about, using their imagination, using their critical eye. They're talking about making observations, blah blah blue blah blue. Let's hear what these guys have to say.
This in the future. It would be sad if it just goes by and nothing comes of it.
Oh yeah, that's a big deal there. Keanu Reeves sure needs to make sure he fixes that one. It's a PR disaster if he's out there liking Graham Hancock, right? I mean, there's like 24 archaeologists on the planet that absolutely hate Graham Hancock, and then there's Netflix and all the people that watched Ancient Apocalypse and loved it, and all the millions of people that bought his books. But no, don't worry about all of that. We've got guys like Flint Dibble and John Hoops over here so Keanu Reeves, he's got a black mark on his name now. This is absurd, man. This is so detached from reality. It's like, dude, you are aligning yourself on the opposite side of Keanu Reeves while you acknowledge the fact that he is fucking untouchable. Maybe I could be wrong here. Maybe you should be a little more tactful about this, because just saying he's wrong, you might just blow up in your face. I mean, I could be wrong, but I am also of the opinion that Keanu Reeves' online reputation is a bit on the untouchable side of things. So I would be hard pressed to, if I was thinking strategically, to just array myself straight up against where he was standing and be like, dude, you need to fix yourself, because that would basically make me look like an asshole. But you know what? I'm also not making this video just to chime in and weasel some views off of you guys, as is readily apparent by the disparity of numbers. I'm here purely because y'all got letters next to your name and you're just spouting out absurd bullshit while you try to debunk Graham Hancock. It's almost like people like Flint Dibble and John Hoops have established this kind of culture of lying when you go to debunk somebody if you consider them pseudo. It's kind of fucking gross. So here I am.
I give Keanu a pass just because he's so unproblematic, but it feels like he's just been sort of sucked in because he's just too nice. He's like listening to Hancock and being like, oh, that sounds really cool, the way you would if you were kind of getting stopped by a witness or a Mormon or something, and you have certain levels of politeness. You have to let them kind of just work it out, and then you can say, okay, that's been a nice chat, I'll see you.
And this is why you need to do basic research. Like you said, he doesn't know anything about Graham Hancock's work. He hasn't watched any of his stuff before. But he's smart enough to realize that arraying yourself against Keanu Reeves is probably not the smartest thing in the world. So he tries to play the nuance card. However, he makes it sound like Graham Hancock knocked on Keanu's door and was like, hey man, have I told you the good word of the story of Atlantis? You've had your old brother Plato here? You tell you about any of how he can save your soul? No, but that's not what Graham did, is it? No, here, let me show you a clip from when me and Graham talked, and you can see what Graham has to say about how him and Keanu Reeves first came into contact. He's on another elevated. I don't think there is a celebrity that the internet likes as much as Keanu Reeves. He's just on a different level.
And it's because Keanu is a really good man. He's a really good person.
I am envious that you got a chance to sit down and speak with him.
It was so fortunate. I've been in touch with Keanu for 2 or 3 years. He reached out to me initially about a comic book series that he's making called Berserker, Brzrkr, which is also going to be a Netflix film.
Oh, wow.
But it started life as a comic book, and it's about this immortal hero who's born 80,000 years ago but can't die and lives through all kinds of situations. So Keanu wanted to reach out to me to see if I could give some advice on the historical setting. Where would somebody be born 80,000 years ago, and so on and so forth, who could do this? So we got to know each other, and we exchanged lots of emails, and we had a number of video calls.
Keanu Reeves was already a fan of Graham Hancock's work before he ever spoke to the man. I mean, you do that math, boys.
But like also like you're told it's a documentary, the production value is high. Like most people are just going to assume that there's something legit in it, right? If they don't have the background.
I have to disagree with that sentiment. I mean, Graham Hancock frequently speaks out against archaeologists, right? And that's one of the biggest reasons that archaeologists take issue with him. They say, oh, he talks shit about archaeology. Okay, well, if that's the case, you're watching...
And to be fair, if Graham Hancock has ever talked shit about archaeology, it's only in response to them talking shit about him and mislabeling him as this or that. I don't think he would have ever come out and said nasty things I don't think he's really necessarily come out and said nasty things in general, but I don't think he'd even be entering that realm of discussion had he not been drawn into it by individuals making nasty comments.
Ancient Apocalypse, and Graham Hancock says, archaeologists disagree with me on this one, but this is my position. He's just told you that mainstream science doesn't agree with his position, so you need to do your own research. You can't just trust this. It's his opinion versus scientific consensus, right? Or the orthodox academic consensus. It's hard-pressed to call archaeological consensus on a lot of things a scientific one, right? See Clovis and Folsom first. But it is true that Graham Hancock's position, that some people will just look at that and believe it out of hand, but they tend to be the ones that are extremely skeptical of science and scientists to begin with. The people that believe science and generally speaking is accurate, as soon as they hear Graham say that, they're going to be like, oh man, I need to look into this, or I need to disregard it or consider it big old grain of salt time. So I not only do I disagree with the sentiment, I find it kind of detached. Like for her to say, oh, you know, that people are going to believe this stuff, right, is kind of ignoring the fact that academics have authority that Graham Hancock does not.
And he does do this pernicious thing of actually having some legit stuff in there. So, like, he talks to legit scientists, and he talks about legit things like the Mayan numbering system, which I'm sure Andrew will correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be, that's fairly undramatic and uncontroversial, that they had this amazing numbering system. You know, that's cool. But then, you know, just at the very last minute, there's like a bait and switch where he says, and this shows that they've been active since 5 million years ago.
No, he
because
doesn't.
They have a number for 5 million. I mean, like...
Yeah.
That's not what Graham said on the freaking episode of Ancient Apocalypse. Here's a clip. Sorry that I have to film these things with my phone, guys, but I'm kind of dealing with like Netflix and ad revenue and all that. So here.
And thank you, Dan, because that means I don't have to.
Here's a way to hopefully avoid getting copyright slapped around.
When do you think the system began? How far back can we trace the origins of this incredible set of calculations?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I've pondered that a lot, and I like to say that by the time somebody carved it in stone, that wasn't their first attempt.
Right. And what's the oldest date that you've found?
There's a couple of them. There's one that goes back 33,000 years. Another leads us to a specific date that has us go back very exactly 5 million years.
5 million years into the past.
And you can do the math. I think that its intention is to make a statement about the never-ending nature of time.
Alongside these dates, one key player in the drama of the night sky.
You don't have Graham saying the civilization must be 5 million years old because they have the number that says 5 million, but that's the way they're trying to twist this up. It's it's extremely messed up. It's very dishonest.
Nefarious.
It relies on, like Milo Rossi's videos say, I watched Ancient Apocalypse, so you don't have to. It relies on the hope that your target audience has not bothered to watch the show, so you can just kind of like massage the facts a little as needed.
Really? Didn't quite understand that, like, and it sweeps by so fast. Like, what are you saying? Are you saying that they were around 5 million years ago? Because otherwise, that's a non sequitur. Like, sure, totally. we can count our time backwards 5 million years too, but that doesn't mean we were there 5 million years ago. Excellent
observation. I would dare say that anybody with a functioning brain would come to the same conclusion. So, that's a nice windmill you're tilting out there, buddy.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a televisual gish gallop, essentially. Like,
Yeah.
as soon as he brings up these things, it's straight on to the next thing.
This is again with the complete lack of experience. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. Look, please don't click off the video, but here from a YouTuber perspective, I need to give them a clue on something. So I'm going to give you a quick example. Don't click away, but watch this. Was that exciting? Did you think that's going to be the most watched part of this video? In hindsight, now that I said something, maybe it will be, but you think this is going to be a popular part? No, that's boring as hell, okay? We live in a TikTok generation, and Graham is not an idiot. He pays attention to these things. You can see that Ancient Apocalypse Season 2 has evolved from Season 1 in the way that it's worded and the way that it's put together. And this is no different. You can't just sit there and dead air the thing. A gish gallop is when you argue with somebody and you present points faster than they can debunk them. You can't do that in video form, you bonehead, because they can pause it and Google, which is presumably what you guys would have done if you actually gave a shit about being accurate when you were debunking Hancock's work. But instead, we got this sort of thing, right, where you're just kind of like giving him the least possible benefit of the doubt, talking some smack, calling it a day. Well, I watched one video and I call it a gish gallop. This is so basic bitch shit. This is the kind of stuff I would expect. I expect from a channel of this size, but I expect the people there to have, you know, the kind of credentials I do instead of the kind of credentials these guys do. But here we are.
Yeah, and it's too bad too, because, you know, I'll even do what I rarely do, which is defend Graham Hancock in some ways, and just saying that, like, he's a good host and he can carry a show. You know, he's well spoken. He knows how to, you know, act in front of the camera. He knows how to deliver this stuff. So it almost makes me sad, actually.
You know what makes me sad, actually, is people that have freaking PhDs that don't know the difference between defending somebody or complimenting somebody. Did you ever heard anybody say Graham Hancock is a shit presenter? You ever heard anybody say Graham Hancock is a bad orator? No. You ever heard anybody say he's bad with words? No. So who are you defending him against, you numbnut? And then you might say, well, this isn't that big of a deal. But it is a big deal, because in his head, he's like, well, I defend Graham when he's in. But you don't defend Graham. You throw him a bone. You give him a basic bitch compliment when he's clearly deserving of it. Yes, he's good with words. Whoop-de-doo. So Mussolini was good with words too, apparently. It doesn't mean that you like anything else about the man, and it sure as hell doesn't mean that I'm defending any of his stuff to say that, does it? It just means I give him an unrelated compliment. Man, these guys are so, like, they have like zero self-awareness. They don't understand their own emotions, their own psyche. They don't get where they're coming from. And I bet you that, literally, I bet you that they have to have their significant others inform them as to why they think what they think. And this is not hyperbole. I'm dead serious. I bet they have to have their significant others frequently inform them as to why they think what they think, because they are incapable of sussing it on their own. Despite all of this kind of blustery bullshit language, when it comes to introspection, they are philosophically null, void, dead. Some
bankrupt
word that guys like me aren't paid to figure out. Stupid heads. They're philosophically stupid heads.
When I'll watch them do the Maya number thing, and you're right, Ross. The number thing was correct. Like the numbers and the calendars, and I thought he did. Khan, which is also the god Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, and it's related to lots of things. Like you just can't go, and therefore this equals Kukulkan. You just freaking can't, right? It could be so many other things.
Except he doesn't just go, and therefore this equals Kukulkan, because he knows you just can't. Here again, watch me point my phone at the fucking TV.
But of all the celestial bodies in the sky, why Venus? It may have something to do with one of the Maya's greatest...
So they're overlooking a little bit of that phrase. It may have something to do, right? And we're going to go back and forth, and we're all going to point out each other's errors. And, I mean, I'm at the end of this shitstorm. But, you know, they're going to go back and forth and point out each other's specific language and point to this and that. But, you know... it may have is very different from it certainly had. It is. Like, that's not my opinion. That's how the world works. If I say, do you know where something is? I'm not asking you to go get it for me. You know, like, even though most of us, when hearing that, hey, do you know where XYZ is? They're going to say, oh, I got to go get XYZ now. And that's a cultural thing. That's a huge problem for me, because we don't speak specifically. We are embedded in innuendo. And anybody who's not following that course seems like a weirdo. I'm sure if anybody is listening to this right now, they're thinking, what are you even talking about? But I think it is so critical that we do our best to speak clearly. At times I've been called out for trying to use big words to sound smart. I want to be specific in what I'm saying, and maybe that is some bastardization of trying to sound smart. But if I say XYZ, I'm not saying ZYX, I'm not saying ABC. If I say, do you know where something is? I'm not secretly asking you to go get it for me. Even though that is kind of the zeitgeist right now. That is kind of how we do things. And we're so upset about the state of the first world, problems. But we are totally avoidant of taking any responsibility and saying maybe it has something to do with this culture that we perpetuate. Anyway, end rant. Let's go back to the video.
Mythological figures. The gods and goddesses of Maya cosmology.
As you can see, Graham didn't say this equates to that, did he? But that's how it was heard in this guy's head, because he has so much disdain for Graham. He either twists everything that Graham says. When it goes into his head, it comes out with the worst possible interpretation, or he's just full of shit. Now, in his case, I tend to think the first one. I think that every time he hears Graham say something, it gets twisted up and spit out in the worst way possible. But it is possible that he's full of crap. It is possible that he knows full good and well what he's doing here. At any rate, that is a dishonest...
Full Gundam well? I think you want to say goddamn, but he's talking fast. I do the same thing. It just sounded like he said Gundam.
Graham say something, it gets twisted up and spit out in the worst way possible. But it is possible that he's full of crap. It is possible that he knows full good and well what he's doing here. At any rate, that is a dishonest statement. That is a factually incorrect statement. Graham does not equate Venus and say, therefore it is Kukulkan. That's not how Graham does it at all. And furthermore, that glyph is kind of a big deal. That area, even as...
And Alex goes so far as to say that this is the entirety of the discourse, is people saying, he said that, and he didn't say that. He asked about that. And then they go so far as to carry that discussion to bizarro lengths and say, well, he's making stuff up, and he's espousing Nazi theories, and he's doing all these things, and it's all cuckoo, because they're not listening, because they, like the rest of us, are immersed in this soup of innuendo and first world abuse of clear language.
He just slipped there. It is known as the observatory at Palenque, so it's not... Graham's not the first person to say that he thinks that glyph, and that's not the only astronomical glyph there, is it? He's not the only person to say that this is an observatory, as our scientist here is well aware. But he's not going to make sure, and he's going to not clearly express that because, well, can't throw Graham a single solitary bone, right? If you're playing that game, you got to kill every single pawn. You can't give him a single bit of proper, recognition, even though he was right in this case. Nope. He's always wrong. Graham is always wrong. Graham says water is wet. Fucking dehydrated water is a thing.
And that's just another symptom of this language issue we have. And I wonder if part of it stems from our the importance we lay on debate. We teach it from a very young age to be able to debate and to be able to debate both sides of an argument. And we teach people to win. We don't necessarily teach people to seek truth or to listen, or to, give the opposite side a shot. It's kind of like we teach people to go for the throat. And that's what we see. And now we live in a culture where people don't trust each other, and even our leadership just lies constantly. And that's on both sides. And it's really all just this enormous manipulation machine that I don't know. I don't know why we're here. Is it because we're afraid of what the mob might do if it ever realizes that it's a sleeping giant, and that there's a small collection of people who are reaping all the modern benefits of the world, while they force the rest of humanity to toil slave-like under their yoke of oppression, blah 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 blah.
But he uses that little spot to really connect everything together, because then he goes in this huge story about Quetzalcoatl, right, the plumed serpent, blah 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 blah, and he's going off of this little bit of evidence that has nothing to do, with Kukulkan most likely. So it just, there's little bits like that.
What'd you say? Most likely? That doesn't sound like what you guys are saying. Sounds like you guys are very sure of yourselves. Why bother with a little most likely? Why throw that in there? Most likely. It sounds like there might be a possibility that there's some otherwise likely aside from the most likely. Kind of weakens your point there, sir.
That most people wouldn't even realize. But for me as a mindist, I'm like, dude, right? You can't even say that. Like I would never say that. So it's so, unfortunately, it's so full of holes.
And here we are again. Is the symbol mean Venus? Well, yeah, the symbol means Venus. Is Venus equated with Kukulkan? Well, yeah, Venus is equated with Kukulkan. Well, then what's the problem? The
like he said, I'm sorry, Dan, but like the gentleman just finished saying, it's so full of holes. Of course it's full of holes. This whole speculation is full of holes. Nobody alive today was there, and there's no definitive recording of what things were going on back then. So even our fullest notion is full of holes. Oh, my dog's starting to bark. I gotta go get him.
Interpretation. This symbol of Venus doesn't necessarily mean Kukulkan. Why? I'm a Mayanist, and this is my interpretation. That's all we have here. That my interpretation of the hard data is different than Graham's interpretation of the hard data. Insert mockery and fucking looking down on somebody, looking down on my nose on them, and that's it. This is the argument. Just do the entire goddamn video, man. That's why I'm not doing the whole thing, because this is all they do. They just, I don't agree with the way that Graham looks at that data. I'm going to nitpick at that a little bit. I think that's absurd. And instead of nitpicking at it a little bit, they just openly mock it like it's the craziest thing they ever heard, when it's clearly just a different interpretation of the same hard data. And that's, honestly, I've said it before, but I honestly think that's why these guys get so emotionally invested, is because they write a story. They get this stuff and they flesh it all out with their own imagination, and then somebody comes in kicking at that imagination that they fleshed out. Their ego made that. So their ego is what takes that person. I think, honestly, is why we see so much of that in archaeology.
And it's sad, because they're intelligent people, and they probably, could add to the conversation, but instead they just want to tear stuff down. Gotta go get the dog. Blah 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 blah
Blah blah blah blah blah blah blah blah.